And we welcome back our hearty post-lunch crowd. We're excited to have you here for our session. Our U.S. Hispanic Council is one of the 7 member councils at the PDMI. It's actually one of our original councils. It's founded about 6 years ago, and we have a great group of council members. Greg Sarnow is one of those council members. Mike Musillo's here. He's also a council member for the U.S. Hispanic Council. And we have done a U.S. Hispanic session at every PDMI show. We're very committed to this space and making sure that the space gets the just due that it deserves. It's a massive and growing space, and there's a lot of learnings that are valuable in the Hispanic market that people can take to general market, or that they can use to attack the Hispanic marketplace and make more sales. So we're always excited to have this group here. We have to thank, again, our educational session sponsor, Blue Water. They have a message for you, and it's actually very well timed here, this one.
Familia Ramírez.
Deje el drama para las telenovelas.
Pero ahora no tengo que jugar con dolores. Me pongo Gembana y el dolor se va.
So again, Blue Water is at table 4 inside. So after the session, you want to stop by and say hi and tell them thank you for creating a Spanish language spot for the Spanish language session. We would appreciate that. Built on resilience, the Hispanic market takes challenges head on. We have a great group. Greg Sarnow, the CEO of Allegro Response, is here to host. We thank Greg for filling in late. Marcelino Miares of D2H, who is the chair of our Hispanic Council, who usually hosts this session, was unable to join us this week. So Greg's here to backfill, and we're very fortunate to have Greg, because Greg is one of the all-time great educators in the DR industry. So thank you, Greg, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you very much. It's nice to see you all. If I can use the word seeing in a weird way, because the lights hardly give me the ability, or any of us the ability to see you. But I want to introduce the panel members to you and let them tell you a little about themselves. Keith?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Hi, everyone. Keith Freibott. I'm the Director of Advertising Sales for Warner Brothers Discovery. I've been in the Hispanic marketplace. I think I jumped over to Univision in 2003. Before it really was a Hispanic marketplace, so I've experienced a lot of growth over the years and witnessed a lot of different changes when it comes to the marketplace.
And Diana?
Hi everyone, I'm Diana Diaz. I'm local sales director for the local station here, NBC and Telemundo 20. I've been in this media space for over 30 years. I started at Univision as well back in 1992 in the Bay Area. Worked on the client side for Pacific Bell, which is now the AT&T, went back into media, Entravision in 2001, and at NBCU since 2017. So happy to be here.
Great. Well, the title of our panel is, Built on Resilience, the Hispanic Market Takes Challenges Head On. I think for me, the biggest challenge there ever has been is that people do not understand how large the U.S. Hispanic population is, and how they over-index on just about every possible meaningful way for direct-to-consumer marketers. So, Keith, I'll start with you, and if you could, tell our audience why someone should be speaking to this audience.
Yeah, I actually get shocked when I see advertisers tell me, oh, they're not ready or they're not in the marketplace. But every meeting I go to, whether it be an agency and or a client, I ask one question. What's your 3-year goal? What are you looking to do? Well, every CMO, every CEO wants growth. Growth is what they say. And you look at the Hispanic marketplace, I think this shows it. And what it is. 68 million strong, $4 trillion in spending power, younger, longer customer. People are looking for that, younger person now with media, so you could get that in digital. but you get it even more with the Hispanic population. The Hispanic population today is the 5th largest GDP in the world, beating several countries, obviously. But this is a consumer that wants to be spoken to, and they're operating in two worlds. They speak English, probably better than I do. They speak Spanish, a lot better than I do. But they're operating in two worlds. So again, when I talk to advertisers and they say growth, I sit there and basically put this slide up or a similar slide to this and say, we have it for you. The marketplace has it for you.
Well, I think that pretty much
Yeah.
shows just how large it is. Fifth?
Fifth largest economy.
My gosh.
Ahead of, I think it's France and the UK.
Yeah.
It's amazing when you think about that, because how many of us who are brand marketers know that we'll go to Holland, we'll go and we'll find a distributor in all these different places, and yet we won't do the U.S. Hispanic market. Deanna, what are some of the challenges brands and marketers come across when wanting to target Hispanics?
There's several. The latest, I would say, with Nielsen, it's always been a challenge because the Hispanic market's really been underrepresented, but I don't want to get too political, but under the current administration, a lot of Hispanics are not volunteering to be counted, to be tracked, and giving this information. So that's definitely a challenge. So right now it's more underrepresented, I think, more than ever. Another challenge is sometimes, the infrastructure, I don't have Spanish-speaking, employees. And I would say, well, that was more of a challenge of the past, considering how bilingual the majority of the Hispanics are today. And, they, like you were saying, they're very comfortable in both worlds, 100% English, 100% Spanish, the 200%ers. So the growth of acculturation is there, but it doesn't take away from, from the heritage. Another challenge, I would say, there's so many emerging platforms right now, so it's like, what do we do? The first thing is get clarity on what your campaign objective is. Is it performance-driven? Is it brand awareness? Is it both? And really embrace cross-platform marketing. You have to. I mean, linear continues to remain king. It's where the greatest reach there is right now. And with linear broadcast, you have news, you have live sports, you can control the number of spots, that you put in a certain program, you can control where the programs fall. So there's tremendous value there. But with CTV, then you have the advantage of all of the targeting tools, right? You can really target by demographic, by behavior, language preference. So, that's how I would answer to that. And sometimes another challenge would be, creative. Some brands miss the mark a little bit and translate, English ads into Spanish without having some type of cultural messaging to that. And that, that is a miss, because then you're going to get more of a generic campaign response unless you tie into some of those core values that you can really make that emotional connection.
I mean, in light of what you just said, do people, with the acculturation that's taken place, do people need to actually advertise in Spanish to reach the Spanish market?
If you want, I think, to really notice a key performance indicators rise and have that emotional connection, you do. But there are a lot of bigger partners that we run English ads on high-profile tentpoles like the World Cup. Because now the demographic is changing and, we're more bilingual, it's not so much, a no-no, right? So I would say it's better, but it doesn't have to be.
Right. I mean, I'm just thinking about intent to purchase from that point of view, since we're all thinking it in terms of that. Will there be a better intent to purchase to watch, for Hispanic people to watch Hispanic TV as opposed to watching general market TV.
Yes, because, you know, if you really want to touch those emotional connections, you know, you have to,
Right.
it has to be transparent and it has to be genuine. And that can really make an impact
Right.
when it comes to purchasing.
You know, just to add to that, Greg, you know, I always ask the question when I go to a meeting, you know, what's your nationality? I've never heard anybody sit there and say I'm U.S. Hispanic. I'm Mexican, I'm Colombian, I'm Puerto Rican, I'm Argentinian, whatever it may be. So it just shows, and research has shown over the years, that they're extremely connected to their culture. You know, as you're saying, when it comes to an ad, some of the research I've seen has been anywhere between, you know, a 10 and 20% lift with Spanish creative versus English creative. This is in Spanish content. But again, they're operating in two different worlds, right? I've never gone to a meeting and everybody just sits there and speaks Spanish to me, right? You know, they're fluent English, right? So, you know, you're watching Spanish language content and an English creative comes on, you know, they react to that. That's a good thing. You're talking to them in their cultural environment, which is Spanish language content. So from what I've seen, that's really what they want. They want to be spoken to. A longer customer, a customer for longer. Remember, these are people that are, you know, getting married at 25, 24, 23. Not that non-Hispanics aren't, but, you know, Hispanics tend to, I'll use the words lead the charge, operate a little younger than the non-Hispanic. I always say I got married at 32, you know, but I have friends that are Hispanic got married at 25. Also have friends that are not Hispanic got married at 25. But again, if you're speaking to them on earlier, you're going to have them as a customer throughout their aging.
I always use this line, you know, Hispanics pay attention to companies that pay attention to Hispanics. It really makes a difference. You know, brands support or ads that show some type of, you know, values, families, connection, community, it really makes a difference.
Well, let's drill down a little more about that. You know, I think I need to ask both of you is, you know, what kind of creative do you really need if you're, you know, if you're wanting to advertise for the U.S. Hispanic market? You know, I think that really comes down to it because many of the basic direct response marketers of old would just take their English commercials and they would just, you know, dub them in and throw them out there. Can you talk a little about what kind of creative, both of you, I'd like to hear.
Yeah, I think advertisers and agencies have gotten a lot better, either producing a Spanish language creative or using an English creative with Hispanic casting, you know, shadow shooting when they produce it. You know, I sit there and, you know, always say, when people sit there and say, you know, can you adapt my creative, my English creative for me? I'm like, well, yes, but let my guys look at the creative to make sure it will work or they feel it will work. Because we don't want to sit there and upset our viewers, right? Because we don't want them to leave us. So again, you know, if it's my face in the commercial speaking Spanish, it's probably not the right way to go, right? But you know, we try to adapt that with shadow casting if we're helping a client with creative and or, you know, recommend you know, using Hispanic talent or throwing Spanglish in to a degree, whatever it may be.
Exactly. Yeah, it's, you know, they pay attention to that, you know, but if you throw in certain cultural nuances, that, you know, can be very effective if it's showing family or celebrations, resilience, things of that nature. It really resonates a lot more. But it really depends on the audience that you're talking to, right? If you're talking to an older audience or if you're talking to a younger audience, then obviously they're going to be more English dominant than Spanish dominant. So it really depends on the audience that you're speaking to.
You know, a lot of us are finding that we're directing our advertising. Our ICP is more for older people, and so that would, you know, lend itself very nicely to the people who would only speak or predominantly speak Spanish. right? So that's interesting. I mean, from the creative side, is there any other recommendations you would make in terms of what has been successful?
Yeah, we had an advertiser a few years ago, a retail, who was doing back to school, and HGTV is one of our English language networks, so it was in a home in Arkansas where they were producing this. We took the exact script, we produced the exact set in Miami, we hired a Hispanic casting, and we did the exact same commercial, and we ran it on our networks. They even wanted to run that in English on HGTV as well, to go that way and speak to the Hispanics that may be watching English language television. So again, I think the world today is not just non-Hispanic; it's every origin, right? So any creative, I think if you're running it in English, you would probably it should be adapted to you should have Hispanics in there, African Americans in there, non-Hispanics in there, right? To try to capture everybody in English content. Would be my
Exactly, yeah, because we come from like 20 different countries, Mexican American, like you were saying, Colombian, Cuban, Dominican. So it definitely helps to pay attention to that because of the different countries that we come from. But again, it's like, don't be too scared. It's like, oh my God, now I have to hire all of this talent. Just really depends on the audience that you're speaking to. And even if it is just hiring, the right, if they look Hispanic, that could work too. It's not, okay, you have to cast somebody from Cuba, you have to cast somebody from Colombia, right? So you just have to kind of pay attention who your audience is and who you're speaking to. Just don't do a straight English to Spanish translation without having some type of cultural messaging.
Yeah, I would, one of my biggest learnings this past year has been at the company in general. So one of our streaming services is HBO Max. We were looking at research for HBO Max, and we noticed, well over 100 million subscribers in HBO Max. We noticed that like 22% of them were Hispanic. We had no Spanish language content in there. So yeah, were they watching in English? 100%. But were we offering them the ability to watch in Spanish? We weren't. So we actually just launched Max in Espanol this year to serve that. We not only saw new onboards of Hispanics joining, but we saw a good portion of Hispanics shifting and creating profiles for Max in Espanol. So, I guess my point there is you haven't missed the boat. Nobody's missed the boat. You could still right size and correct it. And it's not one of those things to where you got to be right on and super smart. One simple thing, shadowcast, try that with your commercial. Another thing could be, add a little Spanglish to it. I advised one advertiser to, they had a Spanish site and en Espanol was at the bottom of their site. I said, you should raise that up to the top of your site. They raised it and their engagement jumped like 35%, just because they were offering their customers not only English on the site, but Spanish as well.
And what we do with our Peacock platform, and when it's a Spanish language campaign, that content can be in English, but as long as, and the creative can be in English or Spanish, but as long as we identify that there's Spanish in the home, then that's okay. So that's another, angle as well. As long as we identify that there is Spanish in the home, you can have the option. It's okay, they're watching English content, but you're still, tapping to them either with Spanish creative or knowing that there is some Spanish in the home.
And of course, it often takes more than one touch point for someone to make a purchase, so that's great. Diana, taking it in another direction, how can advertisers use the latest GDP data to improve marketing?
Yeah, so there's been some, it's revealed that some extraordinary, economic data has come out in the recent report. As Keith was also saying, some of the things that he already mentioned, it's 67 million right now Hispanics, and in 20 years it's going to be 85 million. So imagine, how fast it's growing and the potential of this market. 4 trillion is the Latino gross domestic product, and we're growing at a faster rate than nonlinear. Some of the new findings are 78% account for all new workers between 2020 and 2030. So there's also been a revelation that there's so much more economic achievements. And so what does that mean? That they're going to be in higher paying jobs and more leadership roles. So overall, it's going to impact so many different sectors: finance, healthcare, et cetera. So yeah, it's a market that, you don't want to miss. Basically, you would be doing a disservice to your clients.
Yeah, I remember in 2003 when I went over to Univision, I think 80% of the U.S. Hispanic population spoke only Spanish. They were Spanish dominant. 15% was bilingual, and 5 was English speaking only. That is completely reversed today. Now I think it's 72% bilingual, 25% or 20% Span dominant, and the difference is the English speaking. But you see how that evolved to now. Research is saying by late 2040s, 2050 at the worst, that multiculturals will be a majority of the U.S. population. Multiculturals will be the majority of the U.S. population, and that's being led by Hispanics, right? The fastest growing segment. So again, it continues to evolve. There's never a late moment to jump in, and I can almost guarantee you it's going to help your business in some way. Might be some, roadblocks or speed bumps throughout the process, but that's in any business. But ultimately, if you're not talking to 67 million or 22% of the U.S. population, you're not doing your job. I have a lot of marketers saying, my target is adults 25 plus. And I sit there and say, okay, adults 25 plus. So you want to reach all 25 plus. Yeah, how can you help me? Well, you're not advertising to Hispanics. You're not reaching Hispanics, and that's 22%. I don't know the exact figure of adults 25 plus. So you're missing a good portion of adults 25 plus. So you're really not reaching. You're reaching non-Hispanic adult 25 plus. You're not reaching the full adult 25 plus. And they look at me and they're like, wow, I never thought of it that way. But again, it's never too late to make the adjustment or jump in.
Well, take linear aside, put it over here, and just talk about all the rest. In all the panels that you see and hear, not just here, but in many shows, the talk of CTV, the talk of everything else that is brand new is predominant conversation. Should that be our predominant conversation too? And if so, how do marketers utilize that from the Hispanic perspective as opposed to just general advertising?
Well, like I said, together is better. It's hard for me to take off my linear hat, but with CTV, again, it's what audience are you speaking to? Are you talking to first generation? Are you talking to an older audience? Are you talking to a younger audience? The benefits with CTV is that you have these great targeting tools, right? You can be very specific to Spanish dominant, behavioral, geographic. It's definitely growing, but I still think that linear remains a greater reach. Like, for example, a couple of weeks ago, we had an immigration phone bank in our news from 6 to 6:30 on Telemundo. And in less than 30 minutes, we had 10 attorneys. They each got like 50 calls. We got 500 calls in that time frame. So it's like linear still is very, very valuable. And because of the tracking with CTV, that definitely is a plus. It's getting there, it's catching up, but not as much currently.
I agree with you. Better together. If you should be doing both. You can even say mass reach is linear still, but if you're not in the CTV space or digital video space, I do think you're missing out. There is an unduplicated audience in digital video versus linear to a degree. Just think younger. My kids don't even know what cable is, and they're 13 and 11, but they know how to work the mobile phone a lot better than I do. So again, I think you want to be in both areas, as Diana said, and you get the best benefits.
So that's great. So let's be a little practical here and say, okay, I'm a brand, or I'm thinking about this. How do I jump in? What's my marketing plan look like? What should I be doing? Like what you were just saying. We were both just saying, but I'd like to go a little deeper on this and just say, what advice are you going to give marketers that are thinking about the Hispanic market? What concrete things should we do?
Well, the first thing you should do is call my cell phone, 732. I think, most, in talking to Diana, I only met her 2 weeks ago, and you could tell right away that, we're a customer-based business, right? The way I look at it is if you grow, if your business is growing, my business is going to grow, right? If I sell you something or my team sells you something and it doesn't work, chances are you might not come back, right? So we want it to work. We want to partner with you. And just speaking to you, I know that is, that's what you want as well. But I would sit there and try to understand your goals. And if you don't have your KPIs set, my recommendation would be it's just an awareness play. You get back to that 68 million. A good amount are watching Spanish language content, right? Rather consume Spanish language content because they want to stay connected to their culture. Just get in from an awareness play, right? Because I've heard it all, right? I've heard, we don't have, our call centers don't have Spanish-speaking people. We don't have a website in Spanish. There's tons of excuses out there. But again, we're not, they're operating in both worlds, right? You're just connecting with them through their cultures. I think how you have to view it, and awareness is key. Start off with awareness.
Exactly. The only thing I would add is, again, go back to prioritize being very authentic and prioritize cultural nuances and really kind of highlight themes like family, resilience, innovation, celebrations to really make those connections. I think, you need to focus on partnering with trusted networks, go in and sponsorships in the news, align your messaging with cultural events like music specials, high tentpoles like World Cup. It really depends again on what your objective is, if it's brand awareness or if it's performance driven. But the beauty is, we can help you with both.
Yeah, I think, some people say that they're not quite sure how to build the infrastructure out for, direct-to-consumer marketing for the Hispanic market. Obviously, there needs to be a change in production, right? And fulfillment, all the logistics, really doesn't matter all that much. Whether it's sending a package to a customer who speaks only English, but then there's the idea of, what do you want to put in the package? Can you guys talk a little about different touch points that a consumer might, care about and how that is impacted by, the infrastructure that is necessary and required to sell to an Hispanic customer? I know it's a kind of a more complex question, but I think when we're looking at what's possibly holding somebody back, sometimes you hear that question, right? Or sometimes you hear that comment, I don't have the infrastructure. So,
with my experience, it's like everything is like performance driven, right? The clients want to see results, and even though there's challenging times right now with tariffs and budget cuts, two of our largest categories are legal and automotive. And they are all about performance. They live in real time. They see the foot traffic. They get the calls. So that says a lot that, even though you have these challenges, those two categories are the ones that are investing the most on our station right now. So it really, it really depends who the client is and what their objectives are.
I mean, putting you on the spot.
Yeah, no, again, I've heard many different excuses on why not. You look at who's in the marketplace, in the Spanish language marketplace right now. It's probably about 750 brands last I counted, out of 1,400 brands that are in the non-Hispanic marketplace. I look at them and I'm like, and they all, when you meet with them, they all sit there and we want growth, but we're not ready yet. We're not ready, or the cost of our product is too hard. Well, there's Hispanics making well over $100,000 out there and probably could afford your product, right? So again, and if they can't afford it now, just like a non-Hispanic might not be able to afford it now, be there. Let them hear from you. So when they can make that decision or pull that trigger, they can pull it and hopefully buy your product. I remember working with one advertiser in my earlier days, and I think it was a gym equipment, and I think the piece of equipment was like $3,500. And I said, you got to explain this to me. You expect people to just call up and buy a $3,500 piece of equipment over the phone, right? They're like, no. What we want is we want them to call up, and when they call up, we mail them the pamphlet explaining the equipment and the details, and obviously they put the 5-year payment plan in there and all that different stuff. But that's what we want. We want those leads, so we can now be in touch with them. So again, when they can afford it, we're there for them and they know about our brand. That was a big learning for me, especially with your higher profile, advertisers out there that are more expensive to buy, from bathtubs or gym equipment now. Again, I think there's different ways you can talk to the audience, but not make them feel like if they call, they're going to buy right now.
You're making me very curious. Like right now, not years ago, but right now, are there certain verticals that are more successful on your network than others? I mean, Diana said, legal,
Yeah.
automotive.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's different every year, really, to be honest with you. I mean, tariffs do have a play right now. But, in 3 years, will everybody be used to tariffs? Will they be gone? Who knows? But we usually see insurance is a big player. CPG is a big player. Those categories, legal, obviously, we see.
Well, I don't know how we're doing in time, Tom.
10 minutes.
Okay. Well, could you give any last advice or anything, and maybe then we'll open up if anyone has any questions. But
I would just say if there's any advertisers that are hesitant in pulling the trigger, what are you waiting for? ¿Qué esperan? As we saw today with this data, Hispanics are the present and the future of America. We're not just participating in the economy, we are really propelling it forward. So don't wait, don't miss out. It would affect your, key performance indicators in the long run if you don't tap into this segment of the market.
Yeah, I would say ditto to that. Don't wait, jump in. You're talking to a brand new audience, right, in their culture. It's simple as, you buy 3 networks and you add a new network to your buy, your reach expands, right, to some point, because that network reaches different people than maybe what you're buying. Think of it that way. You're reaching non-Hispanics, you might be reaching African Americans, Asians, but if you're not in the Spanish language marketplace, I'm not saying you're not reaching them in English content, you are, but it's more relative to them in Spanish language content because of the culture and stuff, so.
well, I wasn't planning on responding to that question either, but I think I will. Most of us as direct-to-consumer marketers, we know one thing really well. That's testing. All we do is test. And it's simple. The reason why we're testing, we want to find the best KPI that we can get and give the opportunity to consumers out there to make choices that will improve our KPIs. And how much extra money does it cost? I mean, if you want to really get down to it, how much extra money does it cost to add an Hispanic test to what you're doing? And is the risk versus the reward, which is how we all think every day when we think about how we're going to increase our business. And I think our panel here has made it abundantly clear that it is more than the risk reward is heavily imbalanced on the side of reward.
Yeah, capture them while they're young, and they will be loyal to you, you know, as lifetime. Like Gen Zs, they're very assertive. You know, it's not so much, oh, you know, my grandmother had a fabuloso in the house and that's what I'm going to use now. It's like, no, they're very, you know, they have attitude. They're out there testing different products. Speak to them, engage with them, capture them now while they're young. One other statistic that I forgot to mention earlier that I think is really important, I was at the NAREP Proximo conference just a couple of weeks ago, and they were saying that Hispanics will own 70%, the home ownership will be 70% Hispanic in the next 20 years. It's crazy. You know, we're buying more cars. In new homes, yes. We're buying more cars, we're engaging with retail on economy, with the retail online. They're young, they're coming out of the workforce. It's a big miss if you don't engage and speak to this audience.
That's amazing. That's so.
Questions?
You guys did a great job. With all the data points you guys reviewed, obviously the growth of the Hispanic. By the way, I'm from Televisa Univision. So with all the data points that you guys shared, what is the most important? Like, if you just have one data point to share to a new brand that maybe is hesitant to test or just trying to get into the space, what would be the most impactful data point you could share? I mean, you went over so many, but what do you guys think is the most impactful?
I mean, data point, I would sit there and say growth. I mean, it's backed up by many different points. You know, young growth, size of the families. They you know, when you look at co-viewing, they're always viewing in groups. That's a hard question because there's so many of them. Yeah, correct.
But one thing about that I would say is that in the fact that you have multi-generational households, you have a disposable income that really is a key here. And the intent to purchase and disposable income makes that some of these demographic points very valuable.
I think it's like you just have to show them these facts, this data, right? And change the myth, change the narrative, and really put your money where the growth is, what I would say.
I think the last one you shared about 70% is
Really?
impressive.
Oh, we got one back here.
As an agency that focuses on multicultural, we're sometimes faced with a lump budget, specifically targeting towards the Hispanic demographic. When we're thinking about live events, tentpole events like the World Cup, obviously comes only once every 4 years. What do you think your recommendation is on dispersing a budget like that? Do we navigate our clients towards really these live events where we know it's going to be such a strong resonance with our specific target audience within the Hispanic communities? So do we lean towards that, or do you think dispersing it evenly doesn't necessarily have to lean towards these live events? How critical is it, and are we really going to get more out of our budget in those really specific focused events?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I'm a little biased because of World Cup coming up next year, and it's going to be bigger and better on June 11th on Telemundo and Peacock. But there are opportunities where you can start engaging as of now leading up to the World Cup. And that's something that, that we offer. If it's, sponsorships, the World Cup draw is coming up, on the 5th of December. We have sponsorships leading to it where you can participate, also sponsoring vignettes, different capsules. So it's not just in those 5 weeks, but engaging, leading up to it to give the campaign legs, and that extension is what I would recommend.
Yeah, I think it's always on. Always on is better. I love when a lot of people call us up in May and sit there and say, we need opportunities for Hispanic Heritage Month. I said, okay, well, everybody's broadcasting Hispanic Heritage Month, right? Well, Hispanics are here 52 weeks a year. Why are we just celebrating them in 4 weeks, right? And they're like, whoa, okay. So I said, what about this opportunity? Here's a sports opportunity. Here's an entertainment opportunity. So again, yeah, I think the World Cup is extremely powerful. I actually had an advertiser. I sold the 2014 World Cup when I was at Univision, and I had an advertiser come in. The games typically skew a little more male, probably about 65%. And I had a woman advertiser come in, retail store, guaranteed on women. I said, oh, you want to be in the World Cup, or do you want to be in the novellas with a vignette, as Diana was saying? No, we want to be in the game because we want to speak to the 35-40% of women that are watching the World Cup, because nobody else will do that. I thought that was pretty interesting strategy from their part, from a woman advertiser who's always after women. But yeah, I think the World Cup is extremely valuable. But I think it's also just like Hispanic Heritage Month. If you talk to them for 4 weeks a year, and then you don't talk to them again for the rest of the year, you're probably going to see the ROI on that, which is probably not going to be big. But if you're always on, including the big events, I think it's going to help your business that much more.
Did that strategy work for them?
Yeah, I didn't get all the results, but yeah, no, they indicated that they saw some stuff that they didn't see as far as reactions to their business. They also backed it up in store a little bit too. They weren't a FIFA sponsor, but I think they had some kind of rights of some sort where I think they did a call to action or something like that. But yeah, it was interesting. And they were women 18 to 49.
And the sport has just grown so much since then, right? Yeah. It's like with the fandom and the moms and, the demographic, I think, is leveling off more than it used to be, more male dominant.
Yep.
Great.
Well, we want to say thank you to this group, Deanna, Keith, Greg. Well done.